Yo, what's good everyone? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Prodigy channel. And in this video, I have my week 3 starts of the week for the 2022 fantasy football season. We're going to hop right into our starts of the week. We'll go position by position. And then at the end of the video, we'll recap my starts of the week from week 2, just because I think it's important to look back and learn from our past mistakes. And speaking of past mistakes, making Kirk Cousins a start of the week last week for the Minnesota Vikings was a horrible mistake. In a primetime game against Philadelphia, you never want to play Kirk Cousins in primetime. It's always a risky proposition, and he had a poor game for fantasy, only 11.8 points. There was opportunity for more. There were some scoring opportunities where he just threw an interception, lost points on the pick, and also lost an opportunity to score because when you turn the ball over, you can't score. Your drive comes to an end. But I'm expecting a bounce-back performance from Kirk Cousins in Week 3 against the Detroit Lions. I'll try to keep it short and sweet here. Kirk Cousins, he still has a lot of offensive weapons with Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, Irv Smith, who flashed in Week 2, even though he did have a dropped long bomb touchdown. There's not many touchdowns that can get open deep, and Irv Smith almost took one to the house. He still got Dalvin Cook in the backfield. So Kirk Cousins has the weapons. And against Detroit, I don't think Detroit is going to be playing much defense, and the Vikings are not going to be playing much defense either. And what's nice about this matchup is the Lions actually have a decent offense this year. I think this game has the potential to be a bit of a shootout. This might be a higher scoring game than some people are expecting. So he does have some upside where he might have to air it out quite a bit in this game. But even if he doesn't, I think he's still a safe bet for a solid performance in this game against the Detroit Lions. And for my second quarterback start of the week, we're going to go with Matthew Stafford of the Rams. I made him a start of the week last week as well, so we're going with 2 repeats from week 2, and this was actually a good call last week. Stafford put up 20.9 points against the Falcons. I thought people might have been overreacting a little bit because of his poor performance against the Bills. The Bills right now, they look unstoppable on offense and defense. The Atlanta Falcons, not so much. In week 3, they get the Arizona Cardinals. Their defense is a lot closer to the Falcons than it is to the Buffalo Bills. That is not very good. So in week 3, I believe that Stafford is going to have a productive fantasy game against an exploitable defense. He's got good weapons with Cooper Kupp and Allen Robinson. So I think he's a nice, safe bet in this game to have a nice performance. But if the Rams can also score on offense, this is another game where the two teams might go back and forth and there might be some points flying. So I think Matthew Stafford is a safe play with some upside. All right, now we're going to move on to the running back position. And we're going to start with Miles Sanders, guys, of the Philadelphia Eagles. I think it's finally happening. I drafted Miles Sanders in the first round of a rookie draft in our Dynasty League. And he's been quite disappointing. He's always been good when he gets touches, but that's the problem. It's been volume with this guy. He doesn't seem to get the volume. But this year, through 2 weeks, 13 for 96 in week 1 on the ground, 17 for 80 on the ground in week 2. He got in the end zone in week 1. He saw 2 and 3 targets. That's not great, but it's better to have a few targets than none. And he's been in double-digit scoring for half PPR in weeks 1 through 2. Miles Sanders might be someone that no one was excited to draft him. You might have kind of forgot about him and thrown him to the side. But he is a viable fantasy option so far through in 2022 through 2 weeks. This Eagles offense is electric. Miles Sanders is the lead running back there. There is a bit of a committee. There are running backs that get work. And Jalen Hurts is always a threat to steal those touchdowns at the goal line just because of his own rushing ability at quarterback. So Miles Sanders, his upside is a little bit limited just because of, you never know who's going to get the touchdowns. That was his problem last year, was touchdowns. But even if he doesn't get a touchdown, I think he's a nice safe play in week 3 against Washington. I think he can exploit that matchup. He should be a safe bet for decent yardage. And if he is able to get in the end zone, then he becomes a really, really great play. I'm not going to tell you guys to start guys like McCaffrey and Jonathan Taylor. So if we're looking more in that running back 2 range, I think Miles Sanders belongs there. And he also has the ability to rip off a big run. He does have big playability. So I think he's a nice, safe play. And if he's able to get into the end zone or rip off a big run, you'll be extremely happy you played Miles Sanders. We're going to talk about another running back here, and that is going to be Leonard Fournette of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's always a good play, so I feel like this is a little bit cheap, kind of bringing him up in the conversation. But I'm only bringing him up because this week I like him more than usual. All right. If you take a look at his stats so far, we'll go to half PPR. 14.7, 8.4. Last week against the Saints in a very ugly, low-scoring game. He wasn't electric for fantasy, so if you're really deep at running back, maybe you're considering sitting him. You're probably starting him no matter what. But I just wanted to bring his name up because in week 3 against Green Bay, I think he is a smash play, like pretty much a must-start option. He's been good for fantasy. He's seen tons of volume. In week 3, he gets the Packers. That is a great matchup for running backs this year. And then on top of all that, the Buccaneers are going to be without Mike Evans, who is suspended. I believe Chris Godwin was already ruled out with his hamstring injury. Last I heard, Julio Jones was questionable. I know Russell Gage is also dealing with an injury. So long story short, man, Leonard Fournette might be the top option in the passing game, depending on what the deal is with Julio and Russell Gage. And he already has that ability to catch passes, even when all the other wide receivers are healthy. So in a game with limited receiving options, he might see even more work. And even, let's just say he doesn't see the work in the air, which he probably will. On the ground, I think he can exploit this matchup, and he should see plenty of volume, and he'll have scoring opportunities. So Leonard Fournette is pretty much a must start for me in week 3. All right, next up, we're going to bring up another guy that maybe I'm kind of cheating by, picking someone that's probably a start on your team no matter what. But kind of like Leonard Fournette, I just really wanted to talk about this player in this video. And it's my video, so I'm going to do it. And that's Dalvin Cook of the Minnesota Vikings. That's who we're talking about now. Very disappointing start to the season so far. You invested a first-round draft pick in him in your drafts in the offseason. Week 1, 20 for 90 on the ground, 3 for 18 through the air, 12.3 points. That was a decent performance for fantasy. And then in week 2, things just went awry, man. 6 for 17 on the ground, 4 for 19 through the air. The whole Vikings offense and defense just got obliterated. I'm a Vikings fan, by the way. I'm a big Vikings fan. And we have another Viking to talk about later in this video. But in week 3 against Detroit, if Dalvin Cook was going to have a get-right game, this is it right here. Like I said with Kirk Cousins, I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. Dalvin Cook should see the volume, and he should be able to exploit the Detroit Lions. And he should be involved in the passing game as well. So obviously, you're probably starting Dalvin Cook anyways. But if you are worried about him, I'm just recommending to you that you stick with it for at least one more week. If for whatever reason he comes out and things just don't work out, then I would start to panic. But I think this is a get-right week for Dalvin Cook in week 3 against the Lions. And my final running back start of the week is David Montgomery of the Chicago Bears. I feel like each and every season, this guy is slept on. He's undervalued. Well, I mean, the guy, he gets the work and he produces with it, okay? Week 1, not a great week, but let's remember that game was played, it was like a swimming pool. It was literally one of the craziest rain games I've ever seen. People were doing slip and slides on the field. The footing was a mess. And it was, the 49ers defense, which is typically pretty solid, okay? So we'll give him a pass for week 1. And even then, he had 6.5 points, which obviously isn't great. But, we move on from week 1. Week 2, in a good matchup against the Packers, 15 for 122 on the ground, 2 for 14 through the air, almost 15 points in half PPR. He's a good quality running back. Obviously, the Bears' offense is limited. And if it was a brutal matchup where I thought the Bears were just going to get boat raced from start to end, then David Montgomery is a little bit more of a questionable play. But in week 3, he gets the Houston Texans. Now, this is a very exploitable defense, and this is a game where the Bears can actually keep up with the Texans. I don't expect one team to blow out the other, and I think it'll be a competitive game. So David Montgomery should see volume throughout. And like I said, against the Texans, that is a team that he should be able to run on because he's talented when he gets the ball in his hands. So I would definitely fire up David Montgomery this week against the Houston Texans. Now we're going to move to the wide receiver position. I'm just going to talk about one guy, and that's Michael Thomas, wide receiver of the New Orleans Saints. There was a time when this guy was an auto start each and every week, but he dealt with injuries for the longest time. People kind of forgot about him. Honestly, none of us knew if he was going to come back and be productive ever again. He's in his upper 20s. He's 29 years old, dealing with all those injuries. We just never knew if we'd see prime Michael Thomas again. Well, he came into the season healthy, and 2 weeks in at least, he's been great for fantasy against Atlanta and Tampa Bay, 20 and 15.5 points respectively. Respectively. We're always respectful of Michael Thomas. And half PPR scoring, 8 and 9 targets, and he's actually getting in the end zone. 2 touchdowns and 1 touchdown. Obviously, touchdowns are hard to predict. They'll fluctuate. And I'm not saying no one's ever a guarantee to score a touchdown. And he might not get a touchdown this week. That's not the point. The point is he is seeing the volume, and Michael Thomas is back as a very, very playable option in fantasy. He's not, this Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson level play where obviously, you start him. But Michael Thomas is coming back, into his own, where this is someone that each and every week you could probably consider starting him. And week 3 against the Carolina Panthers, I like him as a nice, solid wide receiver too. My final start of the week, we're going to go with one tight end this week, and that's going to be Irv Smith Jr., tight end of my Minnesota Vikings. Last week, he had a brutal drop. It was a bad drop. He could have had a week-winning type of performance last week. He did drop the touchdown, but even with that being said, he went 5 for 36 through the air, got in the end zone still for a touchdown, 12.1 points in fantasy. He saw 8 targets, which is very encouraging. And I've already talked about this matchup already with the other players, but I think this could be a higher scoring game than some people think. And like I said, guys, I'm not going to tell you to start Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews because those are just obvious plays. You lock them in your lineup every week. Irv Smith is someone that you could probably pick up off your waiver wire if someone didn't pick him up already. And you could throw him in there if you're kind of streaming the position. For example, I have Dalton Schulz on my fantasy team. He got injured in week 2. I don't remember what his status is for week 3. Can't remember if he's going to miss the game or if he's questionable. But even if he plays, that's kind of risky with the injury with no Dak Prescott. So I am likely going to be playing Irv Smith in that spot as a replacement. If you're streaming the tight end position, this is a great option for your team. Now, let's be real, guys. The tight end position, if you're not one of those top tier guys, you're always subject to a bust week, okay? So any tight end other than like the top handful of people, it's always a risky play, but that's what most teams are doing out here. And Irv Smith against the Detroit Lions in a matchup that could be high scoring, coming off a week where he saw 8 targets, which is pretty good for fantasy, and was 1 drop away from an elite performance. I think Irv Smith is a nice little dart throw at the tight end position. All right, and really quickly, guys, now that we concluded my starts of the week for week 3, we're going to take a look at my starts of the week for week 2 just to see how we did. We'll go rapid fire here. My starts of the week last week were Derek Carr, Matthew Stafford, and Kirk Cousins at quarterback. Derek Carr finished as the quarterback 10 with 18.98 points, and Stafford finished as a quarterback 11 with 18.88 points. So those were quarterback 1 performances. Very proud of myself for that. And primetime Kirk let us down, only 8.84 points. It's a shame. You hate to see it. Moving on to the running back position for week 2. I suggested to play Aaron Jones, and my goodness, did he show up and show out. Coming off a sort of pedestrian week 1, he came out and saw 30.5 points in half PPR. Good for the running back number 2 overall on the week. And honestly, he could have had 1,000 points if they just gave him the ball more. They were splitting work with A.J. Dillon, which they're obviously always going to do, but Aaron Jones looked electric in that game. I suggested playing Antonio Gibson. He was the running back 15 on the week, 11.1 points in half PPR. He did get bailed out by a touchdown. Without that touchdown, it's probably a week to forget for Antonio Gibson, but we lucked out there with that one. And then finally, I suggested playing Jeff Wilson with the Elijah Mitchell injury, the starting running back for the 49ers. He came out 18 for 84 on the ground, 2 for 19 in the air, and 11.3 points for fantasy and half PPR. He was the running back 14 on the week. So that, honestly, our running back calls were very good, even though we got a little bit lucky with Gibson getting in the end zone. We lucked out a little bit here. And we're going to move on to the wide receiver position. I typed in Hollywood because I just call him Hollywood Brown. I forgot his real name was Marquise. So Marquise Hollywood Brown, wide receiver of the Cardinals. He was another start of the week last week for me. Not the greatest week, man. 6 for 68, 9.8 points. It wasn't a horrible week, but that's not what you're hoping for with Hollywood Brown, especially in a matchup against the Raiders. So not like a league losing type of performance, but you were hoping for more. And then I also said to play Julio, but he ended up not playing. And then perhaps my worst call of the week, that is Dalton Schulz. Tight end starts of the week are always... Oh, Dalton Schulz. I mean, didn't he finish with like... He was low. Because I believe he also lost a fumble. If I'm not mistaken. There he is. Tight end 51 for the Dallas Cowboys. 0.8 points. listen, I did preface this call by saying there is no Dak Prescott, but the whole point of me including him in the last video was, hey, I was saying, hey, no Dak, no problem. He should still see volume. Cooper Rush should be able to kind of check it down to him. Well, he only saw 4 targets, caught 2 of them for 18 yards and lost a fumble, and he got injured at the end of that game. It was just a brutal week for Dalton Schultz. So hopefully he rests up and is back to continue dominating, because Dalton Schultz, he was my offseason darling. He was one of my favorite draft picks. So get healthy, Dalton. We need you back. That's going to do it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Make sure to drop a like, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys later. Peace out.